and welcome back to Scottish Independence Podcasts. This week's episode, Marlene and I were delighted to be invited to take part in the panel for Edinburgh Women for Indy's AGM. And as always happens when you get a group of women talking to women, it's a very pleasant conversation, but no less interesting for that.
So there was you and me, Sam Page from Yes for EU, and then Ruth Ritchie, who lives down in the Borders and has done a lot of campaigning down there. But on that occasion, she was there as an activist within Believe in Scotland. I mean, it was nice to be asked to go and be on a panel to speak. I really enjoyed it, and it was a nice wee trip over to Edinburgh.
The panel was introduced by Selma Rahman, the convener of Edinburgh Women for Indy.
So the idea is that in the order of your lucky dip, we'd like you to speak about yourselves, tell us what you're doing, how it's doing, and then we'll have a very genteel question and answer session. Thank you very much.
The first speaker is Sam Page from Yes for EU, and her topic was, why should we go back into the EU?
I don't know about you, but I feel that I'm succumbing to this boiling frog syndrome. You know, when I go into the supermarket and I see empty shelves, I'm thinking, oh, that's normal. And actually, if you think back a few years ago, they always used to be full, didn't they? And there was also less choice, especially if you want to get stuff from Europe. And I think now with tariffs coming in, extra tariffs, there's going to be even more price rises. In fact, Brexit added £210 to every food bill between 2019 and 2021. And more tariffs, as I say, are coming soon. So that means that there could possibly be more price rises as well. I don't know if you've been following the news, but a lot of the trucks that are coming in, they now have to drive from Dover, about 20 miles away, to a special place where there's no facilities at all. I think there's just a water fountain and nothing else. And then sometimes they've been there for like 15 or more hours, just sitting in this very small room, waiting for their load to be checked. And the guys that are doing it sometimes don't know what they're doing, and they've just left it in a mess, and then we get to the destination, the buyer doesn't want it. And there's all sorts of problems coming up because of this checking that's going on. Well, food poisoning, not just in the rivers where people are being poisoned in England in particular, but also buying stuff that's not fresh. There's also drug shortages, twice as many. I don't know if you remember, the Medicines Agency used to be located in London, and we used to get first choice for all the new drugs coming out. Now we're at the bottom of the list. And I mentioned the polluted rivers, yes. We're fortunate that water has not been privatised in Scotland. But down south, it's really expensive, your water bill. And some people are on meters, you know, and they can't afford to pay sometimes. They can even be cut off. And yet there have been, in some cases, the rivers have been poisoned particularly by chicken farmers in the Wye Valley. I lived down south before the Brexit referendum. That's why I came here, because it didn't go the way I wanted. But I remember arguing with people about the importance of environmental standards. They didn't know they came from the EU. You know, we were a transition group, and we were really concerned about the environment. And I was arguing with people, and they said, "Well, what about homeopathy? You know, they're trying to ban homeopathy." Oh, God. But yeah, the actual standards that the EU had for water were much higher than they are in this country. And the first thing that was done was just to forget about environmental standards. And I know that the environment is devolved to Scotland, and they do have more control. But even so, because of the way that Westminster behaves towards Scotland, it's not always possible to keep aligned with Europe. And of course, if you've been travelling anywhere, you will have noticed, I'm sure you haven't got used to it yet, the long queues and the need for visas, special driving licenses and various things that you need. Roaming charges, which have been brought back for people who are travelling in Europe, for us, that is. And then, of course, the saddest thing is that your grandchildren will be missing out on gap years in Europe. I know that my son spent a whole summer, a whole year actually, in France skiing, cleaning toilets at the same time, but it was a good experience. And, you know, young people are missing out on that now. And so are we getting poorer? Well, I think the answer to that is yes. The UK has lost 120 billion from its GDP and 40 billion from extra tax receipts since the referendum. And that's in reduced household income by an average of £2,000 per household by 2023. And then people say, well, why not join EFTA? Well, you can't just join EFTA, you have to join EFTA and the EEA. And the EEA is all of the EU countries plus the 4 countries that are in EFTA. And it would mean we'd have no seat at the table, and we'd be a rule taker because you wouldn't have MEPs, no representation on the Commission, or as a president of the rotating presidency on the Council of Europe. And of course you can't join a customs union, so there'll be no automatic trade deals around the world. You would have to negotiate your own trade deals, and you can see Liz Truss made a really good job of that. So the fastest way to join the European Union is to do what Ukraine and Georgia have done, which is negotiate an association agreement. And we could start doing that the very next day after independence. And the actual association agreement is a way of accessing the single market, and you negotiate it with the EU, and they say what they want in return and how you can become more aligned during the time while you're negotiating the full treaty. But there are certain things that need to be aligned, and so our group has done a few workshops, and I think you actually produced a video of it, of how to actually write an association agreement. What does it mean? What has to be aligned? Obviously the currency, we need our own currency, we need to think about the border, also the farm payments and how we can keep aligned for the farmers so that they continue to get benefits and we still get our food, which is, lots of farmers in England are dropping out of farming because it's not profitable anymore, and they're being undercut by Australia and New Zealand and various other countries. So an association agreement is a fantastic way of, within a few months that could be negotiated. We could already start trading using the single market. We could have Erasmus back, various other things that we've negotiated. And in return, of course, the EU would be really keen to get our renewable energy. Any surplus that we have, we'd have to reconstitute the grid and build an interconnector into the North Sea, where they need to, the EU is already planning a sort of hub, so various countries will interconnect and swap energy on different days depending whether the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. And if Scotland can feed into that, we'll get huge benefit, rather than at the moment it's all being sucked down south and we're paying the highest standing charges in the whole of the UK for our own energy. I mean, it's just shocking. So yeah, that's why we should think about, and if anyone wants to have a workshop on how to do an association agreement and what you need to consider, as I say, we are running a workshop, or you can actually watch a fantastic video that Fiona and Marlene created, which is online at the moment. They can give you the link.
And next is Ruth Ritchie on behalf of Believe in Scotland.
The topic I was given was grassroots. And if you look up a dictionary, you'll find definitions like the rank and file, or the common or ordinary people. Are we ordinary people? I don't think so. I think we're visionaries. I think we're warriors. I think that we are, as is often the case, underestimated. As for this rank and file, we are far from dumb soldiers blindly following the instructions of some great leader. We are educated and informed, and we make our own decisions. We are compassionate, focused, determined, gentle, yet fierce. With the knowledge that what we do now is for the ultimate benefit of everyone in Scotland, we keep on doing it even if we fear that we may not see the outcome ourselves. We don't stop because it's difficult or painful. We don't stop even when those who have shared our dream haven't lived to see its fruition. We don't stop when our aims are disapproved of. We certainly don't stop because someone tells us that we can't or we shouldn't. We might be thought of as the feisty heart and soul of the independence movement, but we don't function alone. The body of the independence movement seems to have been blundering along at times, and some would say that this is because there is no one at the helm. Many would say this is the job of the politicians, and to some degree it is. But they are only the political arm of the body of independence. We need them to be the ones to reach out and grab our freedom with us, not for us. We need their legitimacy as representing the will of the people. This body of independence, some might even say, has become a zombie, doggedly pursuing the unachievable while slowly rotting away. But as somebody said earlier on, we are still here. We're still alive, very much alive. Maybe we're not kicking quite as much as sometimes we have done, but we're certainly not dead. Our body of independence works because it's made from many different parts. Some of those parts have one main focus, some are very adaptable and open, and some are rigidly hammering away at their own particular topic. Yet all the parts of our movement have a purpose, and the movement needs to be nurturing every possibility in achieving our goal. We need every part, even the views we disagree with, to help our country grow and evolve, to ensure our country is one of fairness and acceptance of a diversity of views. We may be following slightly different paths, but we have the same destination. We can respect each other, even if we wholeheartedly disagree on some points. We can walk beside each other, even when we can't walk hand in hand. I can't deny that many of us are tired and sad and deflated. We've been forging our battle for a decade, seeking the chance of that battle for decades before. We've smelled our freedom, and we've fallen into despair when we've lost or been let down. But we keep going, because in the legendary words of one of many grassroots campaigners to have gone before us, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? It's up to us. We need each other, to bolster each other, to share each other's talents and ideas, to remind each other that we are not alone in these darker days, and to celebrate our successes along the way. During the long incarceration of lockdowns, many of us found our movement had transferred online. Our hopes of face-to-face meetings, campaigning and so on burned to ashes, out of which arose Believe in Scotland. As a collaboration of 142 pro-independence groups and organisations, Believe in Scotland is probably the most representative collective at the moment, offering the chance to share knowledge, to listen to the needs of the grassroots campaigners, and seek to provide resources to help us all. Believe in Scotland was indeed a light in the darkness. Some of you may have attended one or more of Believe in Scotland's All Yes group meetings or congresses, or be part of an affiliated group, and heard about the need to prepare for the Convention on Scottish Independence. Perhaps this is the focus of the burst of energy that was mentioned before. This isn't a talking shop for pro-independence views, but a legally established convention with representatives from all across Scottish life. Businesses, religious institutions, public bodies, grassroots, politicians, to provide a route to independence already mandated by our pro-Indy majority at Holyrood and not dependent upon the political outcome of this upcoming election, nor any granting a referendum. 18 months may be needed for the convention to gather views from all segments of Scottish society and undoubtedly conclude that independence is a viable and desirable option for Scotland. In those 18 months, it's our job to persuade our own folk of the benefits of independence. Both tactics should lead us to a confirmatory vote at Holyrood 26, demonstrating to the international community and an EU who are almost guaranteed to welcome us that it is the will of the people for Scotland to return to a natural state of independence. But you'll also have heard, what if the other voice we all know so well responds by saying we say no and we are the state? Well, we say yes and we are the people. Well, we are the people, and we'll just do it anyway. We have the body of independence and all its vital composite parts. We have the benefit of the political arm waiting to grab independence. By working with each other, we have the means to win over the mindset of the population through simple conversations, through music, through art, through gentle persuasion, through eye-catching demonstrations, through cups of tea and cake. Who could possibly know how to win over our own folk better than we do? I would expect that few of us here have met someone who truly understands and cares about GERS more than they care about the price of their food and their fuel, or their access to good, fast, effective healthcare for a loved one. We know when facts and figures or debunking myths are the way to go, and we know when what people really need is the reassurance that whatever it is that's most important to them, or whatever it is that they fear for, will be safe and protected in an independent Scotland. Do we have all we need without a leader, without a head for the body of independence? Unfortunately, today's world is so much about face and media and getting what you want out to the right people and places at the right time. Is this where we need that irresistible face, that charmer, that undeniably charismatic personality? Maybe. But it's too easy for those who are against us to demonise, to undermine, to discredit, to prosecute just one leader. Maybe we don't need a leader as such, but we do need talented, alluring, motivational, intelligent, but relatable media faces. Who are they? Some of you perhaps. Almost certainly not a politician. Our political landscape is indeed fragmented, divisive and tainted. Are we awaiting a messiah? No. Just ordinary, grassroots, rank and file, common people who have the magic formula that creates natural magnetism and trust. People who will help us to see ourselves as the Europeans see us. People who will inspire us all to become again that extensive positive force rolling out across our country, to feel good about our future, to believe in ourselves and to truly believe in Scotland. We have so much talent, so much passion, so much knowledge. We may need to rekindle the fire in our bellies a bit, to rediscover our fighting spirit, but we will help to grow the confidence of Scotland's people to believe again and create unstoppable demand for our independence. I conclude with more borrowed words. I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. I'm telling you it's going to be worth it.
Next up, it's our Marlene.
Thanks for having us. I mean, I wasn't very active during the referendum campaign, but the one meeting I went to that really had an effect on me was one that was organised by Women for Indy over in Glasgow. It was in the Royal Concert Hall. You know, there must have been 500 or 600 people there. Speakers like Philip Whitford, Jean Freeman, Leslie Riddick was there, and I was sitting going, wow, thinking, really great to have women like that, you know, involved in government. Well, two of them went on to do that in different ways, and Leslie Riddick has been, you know, advocating independence, hanging on about it ever since, actually, very effectively. But actually, it took me until after the Brexit vote to think, I have to do something. And so what I thought then, it was about 2017, and I went, well, probably, you know, if I'm thinking about where to put energy in, it makes sense to think about people my own age. And I knew there was a group, Pensioners for Indy, so I started going along to meetings in Glasgow, and there's also a national coordinating group that I became part of. So since then, of course, there's another string to the bow which involves podcasts, but Fiona's going to talk about that. But just to go back to April this year, so there was a big march in Glasgow, jointly organised by Believe in Scotland and Pensioners for Indy, which I was involved in the planning for that, and at one point Gordon said to me, I've got you down to give one of the talks, and I'm going, oh, okay, I'll do that. So that talk that then I gave, or speech that I gave at George Square, there was two things I talked about. So the first one I'm going to leave aside for today, but the second one I thought I'd just throw out to find out what you think, because you know, in 2014 it was something like 25% of over 65s voted yes, and 75% therefore didn't. So it's shifted since then. It's now about 33, maybe about a third, 33, 35% saying that they're in favour of my age group. Saying yeah, now in favour of independence, but that's still not enough, and we're the only part of the demographics in Scotland who are still not pro-independence. So I started thinking, we got the email from Selma, and she said, a discussion here about our priorities and engagement for the immediate and post-election period. I'm kind of thinking post-election,
let's hope the SNP gets, you know, a fair number of seats, but actually I've always thought that the crucial election is going to be the next Holyrood one.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking, well, you know, if we can just move that dial a bit on the over 65s, I mean, there's always going to be, you know, people who, yeah, you know, you say independence and they go, never. But there must be a fair number that, you know, we could just nudge and get in favour, and it's how to do that. When I was thinking about it, that one of the things that comes into my mind is, well, we try pensions for Indy. They're in Glasgow. They're out a couple of times in a week in the Glasgow city centre. There's another group that goes out to Milngavie, Bearsden. There's the Edinburgh group that I'm not quite sure if they've started having stalls again, but they've done loads in the past. And you know, you try to persuade people, but you know, the fact of the matter is it's still something like 2/3 of us are not in favour. But you look at the other end of the age group, the under 25s or even under 30s, it's completely the other way around. More than 2/3 of them. So what's always been in my mind is, how can we get each to talk to each other? You know, if we could just get some sort of cross-generational conversation going. And I know the sort of classic one is, you know, to talk to your granny, or you know, if you're that younger, or if you've got grandkids, talk to your grandkids and ask them why are they in favour. You know, because likely they will be. But maybe, you know, if there was a way of making that happen, a bit more of a campaign for it or a setup for it, that's what I'd really like to find out if you've got any suggestions. Because, you know, in Ireland, some years they've taken some big decisions about changing their constitution. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a written constitution that you had a way of changing? And one of the things, of course, some of the things that were changing, like, well, one example was the gay marriage, and another was one about abortion. It was the younger people who were in favour, and it was the older folk who were not so sure about that. And they set that up. They set up a maybe not formal, but you know, a definite campaign where younger people would phone up someone they knew that was older, and they just say, "Can we talk about this? Have you thought about?" Maybe a bit like the open questions you were talking about earlier, but having them over the phone to someone saying, "What do you think?" So if there was a way that we get that going in Scotland over the next, well, we've got a couple of years probably till that election happens, and just start talking to one another, because you know, even if you just got an elderly neighbour and you know you see them taking their bin in, if you're a younger person, you could just go and give them a hand. It's that kind of thing that starts up a relationship. You can have a conversation next time you see them. At least you can in Glasgow. Because we just talk to complete strangers all the time. I've lived in Edinburgh, I know it's not quite the same. It's different, but you know, if we could get chatting to them, you know, and have that kind of cross-generational conversation. So we thought about that from a podcasting point of view, and we could help in that if we could get it going. And I've been in contact with a few pro-Indy groups that are more for younger people. So we'll see if something comes of that. But I'll leave it there. But that's the idea, and I'd really appreciate knowing, you know, if you've got any suggestions or what you think about it as an idea.
I've got a comment for that. I've worked on that once before. It was intergenerational. Within the Bengali community, the grandmothers and the granddaughters. The whole idea of a supportive family, an integrated family, was beginning to break down. Not just the Bengali community, but so many different communities coming in. The young kids, some of them were no longer even speaking a language, and they actually set up groups. And you got the women, and it was of course the women, the men never came. It was the women, it was the grannies, their daughters, and the granddaughters. It was astonishing to be part of that. Over one meeting, they didn't know what the other one was talking about. They had no idea. They just couldn't the grannies couldn't comprehend what they were talking about. And the mothers in the middle felt, oh my God, we're bad mothers, you know, the grannies don't like us, the kids don't. Absolutely astonishing.
Really interesting. So this is on our to-do list, is to try and get that going.
And next on the panel, it was me.
I'm the other half of the Indypodcasters, the aunt to Marlene's deck, if you like. Just a little bit about how we came at this stage in our life to be the media empire that you see before you. I retired in 2016, in April 2016, and did what I'm sure everybody wants to do when they first retire, did the garden, read some books. And then what happened in June 2016? Brexit. And I was incandescent, absolutely furious about something I didn't even really knew I cared about, until it happened. And I just dropped the trowel at that point, got online and went searching for people who might feel the same way. I live in Patmanshire, and there was, at that point, I came across Clacks Women for Indy. So I joined Clacks Women for Indy, and of course found this fabulous community of intelligent, passionate, politically aware, fearless women. So I spent the next 2 years with that group. We were very, very active in Clacks. We did all the things I'm sure you guys do, stalls, leafleting, bridges for Indy, litter picking, events, marches, very, very active. And there is something about the confidence of a group of peers, like-minded women, and we just, we were having the time of our lives. At one of the events, I ran into Kevin Gibney, who at that point, you may have heard of Independence Live. Mm-hmm. They've been filming all the marches and Indy events since 2014. And he mentioned that they'd set up an online radio station and they were looking for podcasts. And so I went home and said to my son, "What's a podcast?" And he explained it's a bit like a radio show, only you can listen to it when you want. All right. So the next meeting of Clacks Women for Indy, we were having the conversation, how are we going to get women's voices out there? How are we going to reach more people? And I don't know what possessed me, I went, we could do a podcast. So the women went, great, let's do that. We went, okay, how do we do that then? And it turns out it's remarkably easy. Phones are sufficient these days. All you do, you record something. So what we did, we went out, and as we were out and about doing what we did as Women for Indy, we just started recording it. It was audio that we were doing. So if we were chatting to somebody at a stall, we might record that. If we were watching an event, we'd record the speaker. If we were having a discussion about anything, we'd record that. And we sent it to Indy Live Radio. Every week, a podcast went out from Clacks Women for Indy. So we set up a poetry podcast. And if you imagine the sort of turn of the century Paris with the artists in and out of the coffee houses, that's what we thought we were. And we went into coffee houses in a somewhat less glamorous Alloa and took over a corner of a cafe, got our poetry books out, some of them had written their own poems, got the recorder going, and just sat there reciting poetry. Now, we weren't necessarily very skilled at the recording at the time. You might have, the coffee machine would start off in the corner, or somebody would walk past you and bang the toilet door. It wasn't necessarily very well done, but we really enjoyed it. And then, of course, COVID happened. And as you know, put a stop to everything. In Clacks Women for Indy, we were going, well, that's it, what do we do now then? And somebody said, well, why don't we try Zoom? And so I went and asked my son, what's Zoom? And so we found out what Zoom was, and we had weekly meetings. We had the Clacks virtual coffee shop all the way through lockdown, and we recorded our conversations on the Zoom, and there was our podcast. But after COVID, life was not the same, was it? We came out of COVID, and we just couldn't get going again. We had a few meetings, very few people were ready to come. There was also, I think, fractures because of the GRA. Some people, very polarised opinions on both sides. Also, the creation of ALPA, I think, caused some fractures, because although Women for Indy is not party political, individuals can be party political, and there were tensions there. And so the meetings dwindled away, and really, congratulations to you guys for keeping it all going, because it is remarkable that you have managed to do that, especially through the pandemic. So we ended up, I don't want to say fizzled out, I like to think it's in abeyance like the Scottish Parliament was, and that at some point Clacks Women could be resurrected. But the same time as we were doing that, I met Marlene through Indy Live Radio. We were doing the kind of political content on the radio, but we started to have to be honest with ourselves that online radio is a difficult sell. It's not like when you used to have a radio, a transistor on a shelf, and you're doing something, it's in the background. You actually have to have your computer on. And we actually had to be honest that the listening figures were not great and they were dwindling. And even with the captive audience that we had during COVID, it just wasn't. And it was quite expensive to run a radio as well. And the crowdfunding money that Independence Live was raising from the Yes Movement was paying quite a lot towards keeping the radio going that nobody was actually listening to. And so we just had to stop and think, is this the best use of our time or the resource? And we had the conversation, as Marlene said already, we realised actually we're podcasters more than broadcasters, because in the radio show you might get a listener, sometimes the listenership was not in double figures, but for a podcast episode, we're podcasting, we're putting it online, between 1 and 200 downloads. So we switched, and Marlene and I and Steve, our wonderful techie guy, decided to focus just on the podcast. So we've been going for 2 years now. And we do a podcast every Friday. We also do, we've moved into YouTube, and so most Tuesdays we have a video out as well. We try and offer a platform to other women where we can, because obviously 2 female presenters is quite rare. And we do try and get as many women guests on as we can. Just short of 300,000 downloads, and we've got 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, so which is worth our while doing, we thought.
We thought we retired.
Yes. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Can we open it now? Can we open it now to questions to our panel? Who wants to start with, say, maybe their first question?
My husband Peter and I, we live in a retirement flat, and we meet all the other residents in there because we have a coffee morning every Tuesday morning. And during conversation, it's come to light that Peter and I are for independence. And the other people, they seem to think, well, we're a bit hard, you know, we shouldn't be of that sort of opinion at all. And it's very difficult to, it's almost as though they don't want to know.
I'm not very often out on the stalls, but I do sometimes go out on the one at Mulgai, and so from my rather limited experience, and I don't find it easy, and it kind of like pushes. I'm quite happy behind doing a podcast or doing a set of accounts, but actually, on the stall, it kind of pushes me up against the kind of edge of what I'm comfortable with. But in that situation, what I do, kind of try and open it out and just say something about, what do you think of the Scottish Child Payment? Because it's such a brilliant, I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. That has been a game changer for families who are on universal credit. I think that's the kind of, in a way, it's not like necessarily talking about independence. But if you say, you get a conversation going about Scottish Child Payment, your mates in the where you live might not even know about it, or they might say, "Oh yeah, my granddaughter's just got hold of that," and I think that's a way of opening it out, because then you're not talking about independence. But if they go off and think, well, you can always make the point that it's only in Scotland and nobody else in Britain kind of gets it, that might make them think. Well, you could always, of course, say, what do you, if you got, if you know that some of them have got grandkids, you could say, what do your grandkids think?
Our part of the world, I'm afraid, is David Mundel's constituency, and I apologise for bringing that name up to you. But we have a good third of our population here is from south of the border. So we get a lot of resistance. This whole, they don't want to know, they don't want to think about it. We find that if you start with one of 2 questions, you've then got a route in. The first one is, what's the most important thing to you now in your life? And if they start off with the health service, you can then ask them, do they think that they're getting what they need? Do they think, is there something that they would like more? Do they feel that it's safe? Or do they think that better things should happen? Then agree with them, of course better things should be happening. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could afford all that? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could just go and get that done straight away? And then you gradually lead them in that way. Or maybe it's their children. Maybe they want to see their children across the border and they're scared that they can't go. So you tell them about how easy it is to cross the border. The other option is to say to them, if you could change just one thing about life now, what would it be? And again, they'll come up with all sorts of things because everybody's got a different, really important thing in their life. Then you take that and you just slowly ask them the questions and lead them round to the idea that the way that they get to save the thing that they want more than anything, or to achieve the thing that they want, is through independence. But it's kind of letting them get there by themselves.
Thank you. I mean, is there a demographic associated with the EU question? I mean, is one lot more in favour than another?
I haven't particularly noticed. I mean, it is associated with independence a lot. Because a lot of people have changed their mind about independence because of the EU question. That's the sort of the main driver for independence at the moment. But at the same time, there were a small group of people in the first referendum in 2014 who voted for independence because they wanted to leave the EU. But I think there were a small group of people, but they're still around, some of those people. And they tend to be older people, I suppose, I don't know. But I think one is hand in hand with the other, obviously. Yeah.
You know, the figures for Scots in favour of rejoining the EU is over 70% now.
Yeah.
I even think I saw something the other day with 74.
I think I just saw 75 actually. Which was small.
And yet the numbers in favour of independence seem to be, well, maybe it's over 50, but it's not anything like 75. We'd all be jumping for joy if it was. So there's quite a... Have you any idea where that gap is and how to...
Yeah, that is a big question, isn't it? Yeah. I'm not sure. Even I'm on various chats, and the EMIS one is really interesting because a lot of them are Labour supporters, and they're beating themselves up at the moment because they realise that Labour they're holding out so hope that Keir Starmer was going to say something positive, and now they've been so firmly against the EU. No single market, no freedom of movement, absolutely none. And so for them it's really hard. So I don't know how they're going to vote. I mean, you know, but there's a lot of people who are really anxious about it.
You were talking about the balance. My understanding is that the balance has changed, the gender balance has definitely changed. In fact, women are now more for independence than men.
Right.
I've not seen the breakdown in age, but part of me thinks it's really interesting to find out why that's happened. And is it because of women talking far more, or what's going on, or is it the age group? But in fact, the gender balance has changed. And I get the feeling that older men are probably more resistant than older women now. And that's quite interesting, isn't it? And the other thing is the Scottish Child Payment, because invariably we've been asking about Scottish Child Payment for how many, since it was inaugurated. And it's the one thing that people don't know, women don't know about. Invariably, it's the one thing. So you get about 20%, 100% Scottish baby boxes, probably about 90%, but always Scottish Child Payment. So that in itself is valuable, just talking about it and actually saying things like Danny Dorling saying it's the most amazing thing that's happened across Europe in terms of poverty, for 120,000 children lifted out of poverty. You know, it's these sort of things, and people look at it and say, oh, you know, and there is a real important thing.
In 2014, I was under 65, and in 2024, I'm over 65. And a lot of the people who were over 65 in 2014 are now not with us. So I think just the 10 years, never mind what's happened in the world of politics, I think the 10 years has shifted things quite a bit. So I think we have to be careful about reading far too much into the shift in the balance. I think we should take heart from it, but I think there is an element of it is just the passage of time.
Yes, that could well be true actually, the shift from 25-ish up to 35-ish.
Yeah.
Might well mostly be that.
Yeah. And I think we have to be therefore careful because the younger ones that weren't counted in weren't being asked in 2014 are now there. And what are they thinking? How are the opinions shifting with the age group as time passes, and we mustn't lose sight of that younger group who've come in.
I think the interesting bit is the younger group is what they're saying again. The younger group is with it. The group that we're worried about is actually in their 30s now.
30s, 40s.
35, yeah. There's actually less, but the younger, in that same kind of accounting what was happening, but as I see it was mainly that women are actually for it in ways they weren't. Next week's podcast, put in a plug, is Pat Kane, and he had a fascinating theory about the age and the demographics. And he said, the people who were in the 80s were starting to listen to music. They were maybe in their 20s in 1980. That was with the whole anti-Thatcher, the counter-cultural punk, those alternative comedians and all that kind of generation. And he said that generation is the ones who are now getting up to the sort of older age, and they're bringing that sort of rebellious spirit with them and not wanting to settle for the establishment, which is not a theory we'd come across anywhere else, but maybe it says likely as anything else to be, and they're influencing their children and their grandchildren to also challenge and question and look for something different.
Ruth, with BIS, you know how prior to BIS we had so many different things, like there was that fabulous one called SIP. Various organisations were part of that, including Edinburgh Women for Independence. And part of what was being said then was, whatever the campaign is going to be, whatever the strategies are going to be, it's got to be information-led. So I mean, is BIS going to be doing any sort of surveys, analytical processes that would address any of these points? Because who do you target and why do you target them? No point in targeting X if X is already so pro-independence.
If I'd been able to get up to Edinburgh, I would have brought some stuff with me. There are various targeted campaigns that have already gone out. There was one for the higher rate for pensions. There's the wellbeing economy that you've probably heard about. There are various different specific angles, and there's also the the Scotland Brief book, which some of you might have seen, which is very good for just giving to somebody, and they can just take it away and they can look at it when they want, which is full of facts and figures. So if you're a facts and figures person, they're all in there. In terms of surveys, Believe in Scotland has done several surveys. I can't remember specific details from it because I'm just a volunteer on the steering group. But we do hear results every so often. The EU question is really important because when the last survey that was done on how you would vote if there was an independence referendum tomorrow, people voting straightforward for independence, I think, was about 50, 52, 53, that sort of figure. But once you said, would you vote for independence if it meant you got back into the EU, and this was quite a few months ago, it went way up into the 60s. So it is absolutely definite that as long as you tie getting back into the EU with independence, we get both. But it's getting that message out there and persuading the political arm of our movement that that's what they have to do as well is really important. But there's lots of information. Is it Activate or something that the SNP uses, and you can find out what the voting is likely to be in different streets. There's a survey that's being done, or possibly has been done, and it's going to enable people who are affiliated to Believe in Scotland to access a similar quality of information that's been done specifically by Believe in Scotland. So you'll be able to find out which side of your street you need to go and put the favourable stuff through, and which side you need to actually knock the doors and speak if you want to go and persuade them. But yeah, there is a lot of information available through Believe in Scotland. Women for Independence is more than welcome to be affiliated with the rest of us and have access to all that information. You mentioned all the different groups. Again, there's I think there's about 30 different individual organisations as well as the Yes groups themselves. So none of us are any better than anybody else. None of us get a bigger say than anybody else. We all have a representation and we all bring forward what we think is important and voting it together. In terms of leading things forward, the idea is that Believe in Scotland would work to strongly encourage the Scottish Government to set up the legal side of the Convention for Independence, very similar to the one that we had, was it 97, 98? Without that legal presence, you and I could tomorrow decide that we're going to set up a convention, but it doesn't mean anything. It has to be set up in an appropriate way.
We have to have something that appeals to most of the people here, and something that's positive, and the EU is joining is obviously a positive, but we don't hear those positive messages from the Scottish government. I don't think, and in this election, it's very important, but generally, it's sort of, there seems to be a sort of gap between, I don't know, leadership or something, and what these messages that we have from below, you know.
I mean, there's what we can talk about and what people are talking about up and down Scotland, and what you've talked about today is so similar to what we hear from each other all the way across the country. But getting the people who've got the political clout to do something is so difficult. Marlene and Fiona were talking about, you know, being in the 80s and the 70s, and the passion that we had for things at that point. You know, where are the young people? Why aren't they in the streets? Why aren't they the ones with the banners and creating the movement? Who knows, maybe they're tired. But meanwhile, we're there. We have to keep on being there, because it's the people that make things change. If you look at historical situations, people, the movement of the people, we become the tide that the politicians can't resist. It's not the other way around. They're only there to serve what we want, but we just have to get that into our heads and then ensure that everybody else understands how powerful we all are when we want the same thing together.
That is so often forgotten, because we vote them in, or somebody votes them in, put it like that, and then in theory we keep them or we vote them out. So many people now, when you stop them, or if they're on the telly or wherever, say, "Oh, it's not for me. It's, you know, they don't listen to me, and it's so far removed from me." That is now a major factor, that they don't remember that they're there because we put them there.
Bit of a follow-on from what you just said, Ruth, about, you know, where are the younger people out when they're not in the streets, and when I was sort of saying, you know, maybe at some point, you know, if we can have a cross-generational conversation and find ways of doing that, that might help shift the numbers of older people. But that works both ways, because I think, you know, the one we might not be convinced about independence, but we're convinced about voting. That we go out, we vote. I mean, people our age, I kind of go, why would you not vote? I mean, you know, why would you not do that? And they're not. So we're also old enough to remember the kinds of people who have been elected in the past, and we don't want them to be that kind of, you know, to be elected again. So yeah, maybe there's a two-way advantage there. Maybe, you know, opening up to older people, to younger people, we can convince them that okay, you want independence, but you've got to go and vote for it, and then they can tell some of us why independence is a good idea.
Fiona? Well, I was listening with interest to your suggestions for conversation starters. I thought I'll share the best one that I heard, which was again very simple. It was just, what kind of country do you want to live in? What's your aspiration? That's when for Indy, and a furious 25-year-old, we were out at a stall, and he came over and he was shouting, you know, complete nonsense, you'll never get anywhere. And she sat him down, she said, well, what do you want? What is it you want? And he started saying, well, I want this. And she said, okay, so how might you get that then? Who's the best place to get you that? Who's talking about that? Do you know about this? And it was very, very, actually quite moving to watch her just having that conversation.
Sam, have you got anything to say to close?
Well, one thing I didn't mention was that there is a group of young people, well, an Italian young man who's based in Cambridge, I think, and he's married to this German lady called Nina, and between them they have set up this group called Europe for Scotland, which is got a load of Europeans to understand that Scotland actually can be an independent country. It's only a union at the moment, it's not like Catalan, and that they have got candidates who are standing as MEPs in the last recent election. They've asked them to pledge that if Scotland becomes independent and wants to rejoin the EU, they will support that. And I think they got 37 of the candidates. Not all of them have been elected, unfortunately, including Claire Daly, you know, that outspoken Irish woman. She pledged, but she hasn't been re-elected. But there are out there, and that will build confidence in people. When people think, oh, they won't let us in, of course they will. They're desperate for us to join. And if we join, then who knows, probably England will want to join too.
Ruth, could we ask you for a very quick closing remark?
Believe in Scotland does have a youth wing, which I forgot to mention. But the key things are we do still have hope. Once this election's out the way, we need to all step up. The convention will happen. We will all make it happen together. We will find that one viable route to independence without any danger of the whims of Westminster. We need to be together. We don't have to have somebody out in front. We can walk beside each other. As long as we're talking to each other and helping each other out, we can all do it. And we can get the independence that they all want. We just need to step up and do it.
Thank you.
That's a great thing.
We're recording this 2 days before the election. The panel took place a couple of weeks before the election, but this episode will be going out after the election. So by the time you see this, we'll know what the results are. Whereas when we're recording it, we don't, which is a kind of weird time travel-y thing, isn't it? Yeah. So, but I found it really useful, particularly with this election, which has got, in some ways, so much riding on it. In other ways, it doesn't seem that relevant to us at all. But it's good, I think, to be cited on something after it, because life will go on. The campaign will go on. We might have to regroup and change our focus, depending on what the results are. But you know, we're still at it, we're still here, we're still working.
As you'll be watching it, you'll now know what the result of the election is, and no doubt you've got your own ideas for, you know, priorities going forward. Put them in the comments. That would be great to have them.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Indypodcasters@gmail.com is our email, so feel free to get in touch with us that way as well.
Yeah.
And we'll be back again next week with another episode. Thanks for listening, everybody. There will also be a video version of this event, which you can catch over on our YouTube channel. And I've also put the links to the other podcasts that were mentioned during discussions in the notes below. Thanks to Edinburgh Women for Indy for inviting us, and we'll catch you all later. Bye.
Bye.